who has made this journey possible. Management and staff are truly grateful for along this new path that we charted 2 years ago on 2nd of August 2021. Thank you. So it's our birthday today. Happy birthday to you, GTV Breakfast. Happy birthday shouts also at the table this morning. And I'll be sending some shouts from all of us here on the studio floor to some of our very, very dear friends, grabbing a name in a second. And it's for you, Mr. Richard Quartey, at the office of the President at Jubilee House, and sending you much thoughts today as you mark your birthday, Richard Quartey, office of the President at Jubilee House. There's another one going to Fijai, and I'll be reading that in a short while. But for now, we'll focus on internal matters. Remember, you should be a part of this conversation because we are talking the mid-year budget review. Send your thoughts to us on our WhatsApp number 05555610034. Let us know what you think about the statement delivered by the minister on the floor of Parliament, which was the 2023 mid-year budget review on Monday, the 31st of July, 2023. It was meant to provide us with valuable insights into the income and expenditure, assessing the progress of the financial aspects of the country, among others, presented by the Finance Minister, Ken Ofori-Atta. The presentation saw him touch on matters relating to the status of our progress towards achieving the IMF program objectives. He gave us an overview of the macroeconomic development, as well as the performance of the government initiatives, which are meant to grow the economy, and many more. So as this matter has become topical, we want to assess what this budget review really sought to teach us about our country. And at the table this morning, we have Dr. Mohammed Amin Adam, Minister of State at the Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning, joining us with some assessments. Good morning, Doc. Thank you for making the time.
Good morning, Thelma.
We are happy to have you explain some of these details to us. So the numbers may make a lot of sense to the lettered population. But for the unlettered, for those people whose only assessment of the economy is based on how much the price of K&K is and how much fuel is selling at the pumps, what really did you seek to tell them when in their pockets they may not have felt much of a change?
Well, thanks for the opportunity. As you rightly said, the mid-year budget was intended to highlight the progress we have made since the 2023 budget was presented by the Minister for Finance, the Honorable Ken Ofori-Atta. But you cannot talk about the progress we have made without looking at the history, where we are coming from. During the COVID era, we know that the conditions of people were unpalatable. You know, things were really hard globally. And we even lost, some of our compatriots. That was very painful. But this was exacerbated by conditions later as a result of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, but also the tightening financing conditions globally. As a result of that, living conditions got worse. And it wasn't just for Ghana, it was global. And that was why the central banks of advanced countries, as well as emerging markets, decided to fight inflation because prices of goods and services were skyrocketing. And in order to do that, most of them use monetary policy tightening, that is increasing interest rates. And when you increase interest rates, that also crowds out the private sector, creating unemployment because production or growth would certainly respond, negatively. And so all these worsen the conditions globally, including in Ghana. And so the 2023 budget was our response to addressing some of these challenges. And we are happy that the progress has been impressive because we have seen the data showing improvement on the inflation side. And as you said, the people may not be feeling it. Even though inflation has come down, we are also not happy where it is. We want it to go further down, so that people can feel it eventually in their pockets and in their living conditions. For example, as of the end of last year, inflation was about 54%. That was really too much. But today, it is around 42%. And
this is why the target for about 18%.
Yeah. In fact, the target for 18% was what we wished for. but conditions globally affect sometimes your domestic planning. And I'll give you explanation to this. If you look at the inflation basket, food inflation dominates. 54% of the inflation is caused by food inflation. And when you go further to disaggregate the food inflation, then you will see that imported food, caused the change in inflation by about 43%. And locally produced food caused the inflation by about 36%. And that tells you that the bulk of our inflation is imported. And this is why I'm referring to global happiness. India has just decided that they will not export rice. The grain conflict between Russia and Ukraine, fertilizer prices have gone very high. And so these are all dictating the imported food inflation.
The minister told us in this statement that traffic at the port has reduced because the prices there have increased about 7-fold. If we are using that to explain this food inflation situation, explain to me why we would have reductions at the ports, which the minister is telling us, and then still having this imported inflation as you're telling us now. I want to understand what the dynamics there are like.
Well, by imported inflation, it's not just, depending on the duties they pay at the port, which comes to us as revenue. But it's also dictated by economic conditions in the countries where we are importing the goods from. And so it is not surprising that once global prices of food, have increased, even in the countries where we're importing them from, you certainly will have that effect on your domestic economy if you rely on imported food. And this is why we want to encourage Ghanaians to patronize locally produced goods. Because as we importing rice, for example, there is available locally produced rice, which is not as expensive as what is being imported. And I just told you that the imported inflation within the food basket is about 43%. The locally produced is about 36%, And what it simply means is that the imported ones are expensive, yet we continue to patronize them at the expense of our local efforts. This government wants to continue to improve on agricultural productivity. And this is why we are about launching an aggressive growth strategy that will ensure that agricultural productivity is increased. That will ensure that production, locally produced agricultural food, etc., are increased so that we can tackle food inflation, which is the major cause of our inflation today.
I'm interested in the food situation because the minister did address food insecurity and alluded to the fact that the performance of the government policy projects, such as the Planting for Food and Jobs initiative, contributed to food stability largely in the country. I want to understand what the cost-benefit analysis for us have been, because if we are told that the major staples, we had increased crop yields for the major staples such as maize, rice and soya beans, how much did it cost us to get this increase? And how does that translate into the food of the prices of food on our local markets?
Well, you can get these statistics from the Statistical Service, which computes the inflation figures. And of course, they will have the disaggregated data.
How much have we invested in Planting for Food and Jobs?
Well, I don't have the figure with me right away, but substantial investment have taken place in agriculture over the last 4 or 5 years since the Planting for Food and Jobs was launched.
Has it led to substantial improvements in, again, the prices of food on the markets? Because that's how the regular person assesses the viability or the performance of a policy.
Yeah, of course, until we had COVID, which affected agriculture generally. And then, of course, the Russia-Ukraine conflict, which affected global food prices, including fertilizer prices increasing. They all affected our own local agriculture. Until that, agriculture was growing around 7% annually. That was impressive. And we even stopped importing some food items, the grains in particular, except rice, which we continue to import into the country. But since these circumstances, occurred, certainly our production has reduced somehow. But we still have available locally produced food. If we patronize them and our farmers are empowered, we can be able to meet our food requirement without relying on imported food.
So when Honorable Ofori-Atta tells us that government is finalizing the Planting for Food and Jobs Phase 2 to ensure a more efficient and targeted support for the agri sector, what does he mean?
Yes, we want to invest more in agriculture. The Planting for Food Phase 2 is going to take off. And that means that government will be spending billions of cedis to reposition agriculture as the main driver of our growth going into the future. You also know that we have the Enclave project, where we are cultivating large tracts of land for rice and for other staples in order to directly intervene by government towards increasing agricultural production. And that is also going to help us reduce the imports of rice and other grains into our country. And so government is tackling agriculture seriously because that is the mainstay of our people. And we have seen the comparative advantage associated with local agricultural production relative to what we importing into the country.
Does it appear problematic to you that despite all these investment into agriculture, the services sector remain the leader in terms of growth when the figures were presented to us in Parliament? Does it suggest that the agri projects are not yielding the desired results?
Well, I think we can do more. We can do better in agriculture. The adoption of technology is still not widespread. Mechanization is still not in the position that we want to see it in agriculture. And so we can do better. And this is why government will continue to support the agri sector through mechanization. I'm sure you're aware that government has brought in some tractors. Government is going to bring in more so that farmers can have available technology to be able to improve on their productivity. Productivity is the key. And as far as government is concerned, that is one area we want to tackle so that farmers have the tools to work with. Fertilizer distribution is enhanced so that they can be able to apply that to their farms. And with the improved efficiency in agriculture, we should see growth in agriculture. Agriculture grew by about, I think, 4.8% in the first quarter. That is not what we expected to achieve, because before COVID, we were doing 7% and above. We want to be able to come back to such high levels of growth in agriculture to be able to meet our food requirements.
Closely linked to agri is industry, because both sectors are affected if one side is not on the up and up. This is the industry sector that declined by 3.2%. Is it problematic when government has put this one district, one factory policy in place and come to power on the basis of an agenda really to improve manufacturing and industry, to see that particular industry, despite the fact that we are told 156 factories are already up and running under 1D, 1F, to still see the industrialization figures dip the way they have?
When you look at industry is not just manufacturing. Industry also has quarrying, and also oil production and mining. We've seen oil production dip, and that had significant impact on industry performance. But as far as manufacturing is concerned, manufacturing is not performing badly, and we can improve on that, because a decline in industry is not good news, because that is where we create the jobs. That is where we manufacture the goods that we import if we are not able to manufacture them in Ghana. And that is where we also want to be able to apply skills. And government is going to invest in this new growth strategy in skills. So YouStart, for example, is going to be supported with more than 500 million Ghana cedis, so that the youth are empowered to get the skills they need to be able to open up the businesses so that we can grow the productive base of our economy locally to support the growth and development of our country.
We're talking about the mid-year budget review. We're inviting you to join our conversation, 055-556-1034. the minister, the delegation before me today is from the Ministry of Finance, the Minister of State in charge of that ministry, Dr. Mohammed Amin Adam. Now, the minority, some are not surprised by their response, do not agree that you're turning the corner of the economy as the minister would want us to believe. They think that we have borrowed ourselves into this place, and by revising even your key targets, it is an admission that you acknowledge that things are not what they should be.
Well, you know, we are not on an island. We are part of the global economy. And so as you plan, and there are conditions or development beyond your control, you succumb. Okay? And that is how we have succumbed over the years to the happenings globally. But we are not a government that will run away from challenges. And this is why we've continued to put in efforts. And the results are showing that our efforts are bearing fruits. I just talked about inflation. From 54%, now you have inflation at 42%. That is not where we want to be. We want to go down further to 31%. We even wanted to end this year by 18%. Okay, but I've also just told you about food prices skyrocketing once again globally. We didn't have control over that. And that is why we had to readjust our inflation target from 18% to 31%. We even want to be able to achieve a single-digit inflation. Don't forget that we've achieved single-digit inflation before COVID. And we are determined to do that by the end of 2026. If you look at interest rates, Treasury bill rates have also declined. They reached 35% by the end of the year. Today, it is about 22, 23%. That is also showing improvement. And we want it to further go down to the 15%, 14% over the next few years. Then you look at the exchange rate.
So let's address some of these ones a bit more head on. The 2022 macro fiscal performance figures were given to us last year, and the ministry has shared the terms under which these ones have had to be revised. But we were operating in minuses of our GDP. We're operating in minuses in terms of our overall budget deficit. We're operating in minuses in terms of our primary balance. And we only managed the gross international reserves of 2.7%. You're saying that we've improved on all these things, and it brings us to where we are now. We can see the figures now on our screen, where we can put ourselves in a better place to implement our IMF program. The minority says that you've only been able to do the things you're saying you have. One, because you have not had to service your external debt with the international creditors, because we've been given a certain window of time to make those payments. And that is the basis for their saying that we are not doing as well as we should, and that you only revise these targets downward because the IMF program itself set some of these targets far below what your own expectations were in the November budget of 2022.
I mean, what you should understand is that the IMF program is our program. It's Ghana's program. That is why we call it post-COVID program for economic growth. It is our program, which the IMF is supporting. And that is why we prefer to call it IMF-supported program. And so these were our own expectations as a government. And that is why in the 2023 budget, we were determined to achieve a 0.5% deficit of primary balance. The primary balance is doing well. Half into the year, we should have been achieving 0.04% surplus. Half into the year, we've achieved 1.1% surplus. That is impressive. Okay. Now, if you look at the exchange rate, that is why the minority will say that's because we are not servicing our debt. That's why the cedi is stronger. But that cannot be true, because just as we are not servicing our debts, disbursements are not occurring. Loans that we have taken, foreign loans that we have taken, they are not disbursing because of the debt standstill. It's the disbursement that would have strengthened our cedi. And so the lack of disbursement should rather weaken our cedi, yet the cedi is stronger. So that cannot be the reason. Secondly, you know that half into the year, we have recorded a very impressive...
Talk about cedi depreciation, but the depreciation of the cedi is still not as best as it was at the first quarter of last year, comparatively, 22 and 21%.
Yes, I will come to that.
Okay.
But I'm also saying that we have recorded impressive trade balance. positive trade balance, which means that we are exporting more than we are importing. And when you export, you get forex into the economy. That is another reason the city is stronger.
Can you put some figures to it for us?
Well, I don't have the figures but if you go into the budget specifically, you will get all these figures. But also, the IMF made disbursement about $600 million recently. That also helped in strengthening the city. And so it cannot be true that because we are not disbursing, you know that the Bank of Ghana is also playing its part as far as monetary policy is concerned. That has also helped with the strengthening of the exchange rate. And you were asking about the figures in terms of the depreciation. As of November last year, the city depreciated by 54%. Okay, January by 20%, but from February to July by only 1.8%. That's very impressive. That's a very good performance. And the city
but are you
even
comparing
became
it to the same period last year?
Against the dollar. I talked about last year, 54%.
In December.
In November.
But in January, it was a 21% depreciation.
Yes, but
and now we have
February,
22%.
No, you are talking about year to date.
Yes.
Year to date, it's 22%. But I'm saying that from February to July, it depreciated by only 1.8%. And so year to date is 21% because of the January 21% you are talking about. But from February, after January, to July, we've never seen such an impressive performance by the city. And that is why the city even became the best performing currency across the 230 countries reported by Bloomberg.
Let's talk about the Bank of Ghana. You brought the central bank into this. It's reported losses of 60 billion Ghana cedis. What do you think accounted for this? Because we know that there's some debts that's been forgiven to the government. Well,
I mean, I think the Bank of Ghana has explained, and the Bank of Ghana is independent of us. They have explained, and I associate with their explanation. The DDEP we did had some challenges in the banking sector. For example, because some of them recorded losses because of impairment. The Bank of Ghana also suffered from that. But government is determined to address these challenges. And this is why we have set up the Financial Stability Fund. And government is going to fund it. Initial commitment of about $750 million to support the local banks address the insolvency challenges as well as the liquidity challenges associated with the DDEP. But the Bank of Ghana has explained in detail. It is not because of reckless spending by the Bank of Ghana. It is largely as a result of the DDEP. And we recognize that the DDEP, as much as it is helping us to achieve debt sustainability, there certainly will be challenges. And some of the challenges have found their way into the losses recorded by the Bank of Ghana. And we are determined to address these challenges in order to strengthen the local banking industry to support private sector activity.
I remember a portion of the statement where the minister said that local banks had made profits.
Some banks have made profits, but there are some that have suffered impairment. And it is those that have suffered impairment that we are seeking to support through the Financial Stability Fund.
How does the Bank of Ghana's losing 60 billion affect the operations or the government plans in any way?
Well, the Bank of Ghana will continue to do their monetary policy. They have the tools, the OMO and the other tools that they use to enforce monetary policy.
Are you concerned about some of the information that's been brought to the public circles about how some of these monies were disbursed, not just at the Bank of Ghana, but at other state institutions where, for example, the Auditor General's report identified huge irregularities, which has led to many, many losses. The minister did not say what kind of sanctions would be implemented when he said in the statement that some sanctions would be applied. For example, we are told at Bank of Ghana over 100,000 Ghana cedis was spent on maintaining vehicles. Do some of those figures concern you at all?
Well, I mean, the maintenance of vehicles by the Bank of Ghana is largely a budget issue by an institution. And you can get the details if you speak to Bank of Ghana. They will explain to you how they spent it and where they spent that money. I'm not in a position to. But let me be frank with you. The Public Financial Management Act that we have is a very strong act, which prescribes sanctions for violating laws, whether they are spending laws or budgetary rules, etc., etc. And to the extent that we apply the Public Financial Management Act to the irregularities that you're talking about, we will see a significant decline into the future.
But the laws have existed for a while. Are you saying it's taking time for them to take effect, for us to see
I really haven't seen the application, the rigorous application of the Public Financial Management Act. We have to be able to do that in order to address these public financial management related challenges, especially in relation to spending and then the application of budgetary rules.
So in all this, at which point, when do you think ideally should the ordinary Ghanaian begin to feel these positives that we are being told is happening on the macro front in our pockets? Because that's our assessment really of how the economy is performing. You mentioned key indicators and the optics in your opinion, which you say look good, but are they leading to a reduction in our expenses?
You recall that just around, I think, December, when the exchange rate depreciation was so high, petroleum prices had skyrocketed. Diesel was selling beyond 20 pesos per liter. Today, how much do we buy a liter of diesel? It's about 12, 13 per liter. Are you feeling it or not? So that is just one example of how macroeconomic data can help us. Okay, and so it is not true when people say that we don't eat inflation, we don't eat exchange rate. They have direct impact on our lives. The extent of the impact may differ from one person to another, depending on your economic circumstances. But overall, they provide an enabling environment for us to better the living conditions of our people. Because if you don't have macro stability, you cannot achieve growth. And when you achieve growth, you create jobs. You know, you are able to pay people more. They increase their income levels and their conditions of living is improved.
Because new taxes were introduced and businesses have come out to say that the tax rates would mean that they have very little room to expand and to employ more people, for example, even industries complaining that there is an overburden, there's a burden of taxes upon them. And yet we fail to meet our non-oil revenue targets when it comes to all the other things that bring us money apart from oil. Why do you think the GRA had the difficulties raising the monies up to the levels that they should have?
Well, non-oil revenue is not just about the taxes GRA collects. It also includes grants. Okay, non-oil, that is any source of revenue that is not coming from oil. Okay, but if you look at the taxes that GRA collects, whether you are talking about domestic tax or customs, GRA has even exceeded its target.
So is the grants that are not coming in?
They were supposed to have achieved, for example, 48.5 billion cedis half into the year. They achieved 49.5 billion, about 1 billion cedi difference. But this is significant also because it is about 50% improvement over the same time last year. So GRA is doing well. Let's encourage them. They can do better. And the minister is always sitting on the neck of GRA to do better because we have to raise more revenue to support our economic program.
What about conversations to bring in more of the informal sector into the tax bracket? Because if we are looking to raise the necessary funds, and I'll ask this and add on another question of where do we expect the losses to take effect? Because we are told that we cannot do everything that we set out to do. So in the area of the cuts that we're expecting government to make, which sectors should we expect those cuts to affect?
I'm not able to tell you a specific sector, but overall, you will see that the cuts are happening. For example, we should have spent about 92 billion cedis half into this year. We spent 68 billion cedis. And so that's about 26% below what we had targeted to spend. And if you also look at the appropriation, you know, the appropriation was supposed to be 227.7 billion, 227.7 billion. We have gone to Parliament and told Parliament we're not coming with a supplementary budget to spend more. We rather have seen a decline in the spending. And so the appropriation is being revised to 206 billion. That's a difference of about 21 billion Ghana cedis. So you can see the cutting is already happening. We need to be able to drill down to the specific areas where the cuts happen. So and that data is available, just that I don't have it.
Yes, so you should be able to tell us exactly where. So if for example, you say that we were to buy 10 vehicles, now because we are making cuts, we are going to buy 7.
That's very detailed information, and I can provide that to you later. That you can
but
use
you don't
it.
have that
I don't
information
have that
right
here.
now.
Yes.
Okay, so let's talk about the energy sector for. I think that we may quickly run out of time, but I'd hope that
there are so many issues too.
Yes, there are so many issues. As former energy a minister who worked with the energy ministry, you would have been able to tell us about the debts that we have from our energy sector, including the legacy debts which government has not had the opportunity to handle fully over the years, and whether or not the take-or-pay agreements, which we are told will be reviewed, are going to take place. When the minister told us that there are conversations with the IPP to, further discuss what is due them when it comes to take-or-pay and the agreements that we've signed, what exactly is happening there? And do you expect that the IPPs will carry out their threat of withdrawing from the agreement, or to not, go through with it entirely?
Well, to say that the energy sector is not a big issue for us is to reduce the import of the burden it has on our finances. It is our Achilles heels, and we need to be able to address it, especially the finances in the sector. I mean, you already have talked about the debt, the legacy debt. We have legacy debt, and the IPP side, I think it's about $1.1 billion. Then you also have the fuel side of the legacy debt. I've heard the IPP chamber talking about some $2.3 billion of arrears owed to them. That is not a fact. We have looked at the data. It is about 1.1 billion for the IPPs, and then you have the fuel side as well. Together, they are even not up to $2 billion US dollars as of May 2023. Now, what we have decided to do is to engage them towards restructuring the legacy debt in order to provide relief so that we do not accumulate new debts.
How much do you think you'll save if you're able to restructure this?
It will not be saving, I said, because we have to pay. It's just that we want to stretch it over some time. We've also asked them to accept a haircut, and that is where I think there may be savings if they accept the haircut. But going forward, we are committed not to rebuild arrears in the energy sector. And this is why we want to be current in our payments for the power they supply to us. Okay. So we have negotiated with them through ECG, and we've agreed to monthly payment to the IPPs for energy delivered. Because if you look at the arrears we are talking about, almost 70% are coming from excess capacity payments. And by excess capacity payments, it meant that we have signed contracts, and the previous government did that, contracts for power that we did not need, and the cost of that is not incorporated in tariffs. Right. So they have accumulated as arrears. We have negotiated
that we need a second part of this program so that we'll have a bit more time to delve into the issues. I'm particularly concerned about why, in spite of all the benefits that you say is going around on our macro levels, we still have not felt the reduction in food prices on the regular market, the same way as we sometimes see with oil at the pumps. But we'll have you back. We understand that the president has just arrived at a function, and we have to go over to provide live coverage for that function. And so, unfortunately, we'll have to bring the conversation to a close here. Dr. Mohammed Amin Adam is the Minister of State at the Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning. Do we get a promise that you will be back? Perhaps very soon.
I was here recently, so I'm happy to come back.
I'm sure we'll have you again. Yes. Thank you for making time. And thank you for being a part of our conversation. Thank you for being a part of our program. Thank you for being a part of our 2 years. It's Breakfast Live on GTV. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, 555, with another edition. I'm Thelma Taki.